Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar today, CIO Playbook, Driving Digital Transformation Success with Value Stream Management. My name is Laurel Heenan, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Our presenters today are Naomi Lurie and Russell Moss. Naomi is the Vice President of Product Marketing at Tasktop. She is passionate about making businesses successful through effective customer-centric communication. With over 17 years of B2B product management and marketing experience, she specializes in large enterprises in their digital transformations. Russell has worked in a variety of industries, including direct marketing, financial services, and health insurance, where he has held a variety of positions, including principal architect, assistant vice president, client principal, executive director, and is currently the vice president and divisional technology officer at Healthcare Service Corporation, HCSC. In this role, Russell's focus is on delivering business value through the use of technology and processes to improve business performance. He currently leads the Technology Delivery and Support team, which includes application maintenance services, application development center, quality assurance, and DevOps. He's known for being a high-performing leader with a proven ability to build and manage creative, energized, focused, and successful teams. A huge thank you to our presenters today. And with that, I will pass over to Russell to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. And thanks all of you for joining. You should never have to listen to your own bio. That's a little bit off-putting right off the start there. But I appreciate you guys joining. I hope you find today interesting. As we jump in here, I just want to start with an overall view of where technology is in the world. Let me start with my own beliefs. I used to think, say, a decade ago, 15 years ago, I shaped my career around the business IT interaction. And I used to think about things as all business leaders eventually would need to understand technology to do their job. Over the last decade or so, with the advent of digital and the changes to our marketplace, it's become increasingly clear to me that really all technology leaders need to be business people. And that's kind of an underlying premise of today's conversation is, as IT leaders, we have to manage to business outcomes. We're no longer the people in the back room that do what we're told. We're really driving the results of the business. And you're going to hear that theme throughout today. Let me start with a quote as well. Felipe Castro, who was on a recent Mick Plus One podcast. If you guys aren't familiar with Mick Kirsten, he's the CEO of Tasktop and author of the book From Project to Product, and a really inspirational leader. But he does a podcast. He had Felipe Castro on about OKRs. And one of the quotes he shared was, IT organizations have been optimized for decades to manage projects. So it's not something that can be changed with the flip of a switch. So as we reflect on today, it is insidious in our world that we think big project and we think initiative, tactical or strategic, of an outcome being a point in time. Underlying value streams that we're going to talk about a lot today is the idea of enduring products and building enduring value through those products and value streams that they support. So with that, I'll turn it over to my co-host, Naomi, for her part.
Thanks, Russell. I loved how you framed us and got us started. So, today we're going to be talking about value stream management. And if it's not already in your industry or your business, it will be very soon, because Gartners say that 70% of organizations will be practicing value stream management by 2023. In order to practice value stream management, I tried to break it down here to like the 3 essential components. The first one being knowing what your value streams are. The second is being able to measure speed, velocity, and quality through them. And the third is to then be tenaciously focused on improving how fast and how well things are flowing through from idea to outcome, so as not to be left in the dust, right? Which is a reality that we're facing today as we transition into, this full-blown age of software. So we're here today to help leaders understand how to get started. And so, Russell, maybe I'll kick it back to you by talking about that first point about knowing what your value streams are. I mean, that might be harder than it sounds, right? I imagine your IT portfolio of application services and products is absolutely huge. So what's been your experience with that?
Yeah, as this very generic example, this is not our actual value stream mapping, but as it shows, there are layers of products and services that add up to delivering the business value. And as you go down the chain from those customer-facing products down towards the platform and internal products, it can be more and more disconnected from the customer and the business outcomes. But as accountable leaders, and I talked about that a minute ago, you have to understand the relationships and the dependencies so that you can implement change and drive the business outcomes at the speed of the market. As you can see on the right side, and something I believe very strongly in, you have to have short feedback loops and leading metrics. So if your metrics are things like profitability, those are lagging metrics, and it's not allowing you to meet your customer where they are. It's telling you what the rear view mirror is, but at the speed of change in today's world, you're not going to be able to keep up by looking at traditional metrics like that. You need the visibility so that your product teams can deliver towards those greater outcomes and again, meet the customer where they are. And your job as a leader is really to focus on removing the constraints. What are the things in the way? And without data, you can't hope to understand those constraints. You'll see there are no arrows here. These things have complex interrelationships. It's not as clear from top to bottom of what the internal product value streams deliver towards the various customer product value streams. So you really have to understand the data and see how little changes make impacts to the results. Having a common language around value streams is really important so that your organization can have a connected conversation that everyone understands the same. I think it's true in IT for today and has been for a long time that sometimes we believe we're having one conversation with our partners that are managing other operational areas, and we walk away thinking we had an agreement and both sides are on different pages because English is not exact. Identifying your value streams or what drives those value streams helps identify that common language that you can use to have a more connected conversation. So Naomi?
Yeah. So, now we're going to try to break it down into more like a playbook, a playbook for the CIOs to help them practice value stream management. CIOs, senior IT leaders, clearly this is not the job of the CIO to go at it alone, but at the same time, if they don't understand or do their part, there's really no chance of anyone else succeeding. So value stream management is a crucial component of the success of digital transformation, and it needs this top to bottom alignment. So we're going to talk about these 4 key components of the CIO playbook, spend a couple of slides on each. The first principle will be driving business outcomes. Second one will be about investing with intent. The third is about measuring true business agility. And the fourth is about outpacing the competition. So let's just dive into the first one. The first one is about driving business outcomes and is about having everyone measuring business value flow. So Russell, when folks hear the term business value, what do you think they're translating it into in their heads? How have you learned to understand it?
Yeah, I'd say generally speaking in the corporate IT world, there's a legacy of changing business value into ROI and dollars. And our finance organizations in management schools for 75 years or more, they've been teaching hurdle rate and ROI in terms of dollars. So I think the default answer for a long time and for most companies is still in dollars. But I would say in a digital world, you have to think about business value a little differently. And I'm going to use an obvious example of Google. Do you think when Google was trying to count the number of searches, that they had a really clear map to what that was going to turn into in terms of dollars? When they wanted 1 million searches on their platform, I'm sure they had a feeling it was going to drive dollars, but there was no equation that they could equate it to that put it into that gave them that term in dollars. So you really have to think about business value outside of ROI and think about it towards strategic goals. And I think that business value, having a conversation of what drives value for your customers, has to be a more robust conversation. We use transactional net promoter score a lot. We feel that serving our members, making their journey for their own health needs easy, is going to drive value for our customers. Can we equate that to them being willing to pay more for insurance or use their benefits less, which is kind of how our revenue is driven? No, that doesn't make sense. So you have to be a little bit more wide open about that.
Right, absolutely. Business value is anything your customer is willing to exchange time or money for. So that's, new capabilities, improvements to quality. But let's not forget that many value streams have internal customers, right, who value additional things that protect the business, like security patching, compliance work. So part of the movement to shift from project to product is about creating shared horizontal ownership of delivery and outcomes, right? That's a nicer way of saying value streams. I'm trying to not overuse the term, but that's the essence. And that requires understanding which things are worth doing and how fast we can get to that outcome. And today, a lot of organizations take this process that we've depicted here from idea to, to done and then to the outcome. They take it and they measure it in vertical silos. So they lob this horizontal process into various shorter segments, where naturally the speed and the throughput look better. And as a result, leaders often struggle to understand, well, why are we always late if the metrics are so good, right? Why are we always delayed? Where is flow blocked? What can I do to help you? So the first play is to change the way we measure, to now include all the steps from idea to outcome, regardless of where the work is done and by whom. And most people in this webinar, I'm sure you're familiar with this as a pen and paper value stream mapping exercise. But those are done in a boardroom and are at best, I would say, educated guesses that go stale and kind of become outdated within weeks. Modern value stream management gets this data live from the systems where the work is happening. So think of it like Google Maps for product development. And when you measure horizontally, what do you measure? You measure flow time, or otherwise known as end-to-end lead time. Not to be confused with the DORA lead time metric, which is from code commit to code deploy. The idea is, how do we get a complete unit of value to traverse this network of collaborators from start to finish? And the other thing that you measure is velocity or throughput. So you can answer the question to yourself, how many units of value are we delivering in a given period? And since we're all investing in transformations, are we delivering more than we could before, right? So remember, we're not counting story points or lines of code. We're really talking about measuring complete units of value that move the needle to achieve the business outcomes. Russell, any tips from your side about understanding your value streams and measuring them this way?
Yeah, we've spent lots of time talking about how to build our value streams, and it is non-intuitive to a point you made earlier. It's an art, not a science. You're not going to get it right day one, so over-analysis isn't going to help you. In our case, we had to turn 2,000 plus applications into some kind of inventory that drove those value streams. And as I showed in the picture, there's lots of complex dependencies. So be patient with yourself, focus on the obvious ones, and then drill in as you learn. Start where you are and then refine.
Yeah, fabulous.
And then, so the next thing maybe to talk about is to track technology's impact on our business results. You don't want to, for those of you that are systems thinkers, you don't want to optimize the flow without it being value-adding flow. You can spend a lot of energy getting things through a system faster that don't move the needle. And again, if you're a systems thinker, this is a fairly normal concept. So what you want to do is measure the impact of those items going through. There's a metric we're going to talk about, flow distribution, in a few minutes that really helps. But one of the things that this is going to do for you is take your conversations with funding bodies, whether they're your board of directors, your CEO, a line manager, someone who's helping you decide how to spend money. It's going to help you justify future asks so that you're not always stuck in just arguing esoterically for we need to spend more money, but you can really, you can hone in on where that investment is going and what you're going to see from it. So some of the benefits of tracking that technology impact is it makes it easy to determine where the current flow is insufficient to support the business priorities. So again, you're not having a conversation of adding more, you're having a conversation of your capacity versus the desire for change. Helps build consensus because it's tying your roadmap with the trade-offs and the prioritization to those high-level business imperatives. It is easy for the CEO to say, I want to take that hill, whatever that hill is in your business. And if you can reflect back to your CEO or again, a funding body, how investing is going to capture that hill, you're going to do much better than just talking about functions you're gonna provide or things that are going to happen.
Yeah. So, here's an example on this screen of a replatforming initiative that solved two problems. So the first one is depicted on the right in the flow velocity metric. You can see that the flow velocity is rather low, right? Because every new capability on this old and complex system is very difficult to develop and test. And what you see on the left is that employee happiness, right, which is a big focus now when we're fighting to keep every employee we can on board, is very low because they're just suffering to develop anything on this platform. So by putting in place a replatforming effort, they not only improve the flow and now can deliver so many more features, but also saw a huge leap in employee happiness and engagement, which led to the lowest attrition rate in 2 years, right? So this type of side-by-side tracking is what creates alignment between everyone that has a stake in the value stream. And I'd like to give some tips here. I think that conversations with product teams about their business results, like what are you targeting, get harder and harder the more distant they are from your directly monetized products. Most we found can articulate their quality metrics. Like we know what's expected from us from a quality standpoint, but how are we helping the business's top line or bottom line is something that's hard for them to articulate. So I think it helps when you talk them through who are your internal customers who are benefiting from your product. What is it that you provide? Do you provide speed? Do you provide accuracy? Do you provide savings? Those are conversations that can help tease that out. And when we talk about these cross-functional value streams, it's important that everybody understands it, from the developer to the product owner, to the product manager, to the portfolio manager, that they're all aligned so that they can tweak their flow to help achieve those goals.
Yeah, the way I think about that, Naomi, and everybody has heard the story about the janitor at NASA. The person was scrubbing the floors, and supposedly somebody said, "What do you do here?" And the janitor said, "I'm trying to put somebody on the moon." And that's kind of a classic example of anecdotally translating the value of what somebody's doing all the way to the impact. Try to help your teams think about that top line, bottom line, quality improvements they help influence towards the outcomes, not just the task they're performing. It's a long chain from the tasks we perform at a developer quality assurance level to the ultimate outcome. One of the game changers for this is you see a lot of companies move to autonomous teams, where that autonomous team handles more of the vertical and goes across horizontals so that they are fully empowered all the way from sweeping the floor to building the rocket.
Yeah, I love that story. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have a little fun now and do just a quick poll to wake you guys up because we've talked a lot. So can we pop the poll up?
Yeah, what are flow, feedback, and experimentation? Is it a hippie band from the 70s, a new TikTok hairstyling trend, or the 3 ways of DevOps? Place your bets on this tough question.
All right, wow, we have an engaged and a very aware audience. I love it. So let's talk about the 3 ways of DevOps just quickly. Everybody knows there's only really one way to improve, and that's through learning. Experimentation is super critical to that. As a leader, creating that culture of continuous learning and experimentation is really important. And it's tied to the first way of DevOps, the flow, systems thinking. How do we improve the end-to-end flow? Your experiments need to be geared towards that. If your experiments are not hitting on the constraint, then they're really not going to add a lot of value.
Yeah. And what we find is that like most value streams are so overloaded, they don't have time to learn, they don't have time to improve. And so that's where, the focus of the leader has to be. Your role, if you want to, change the culture to one of continuous learning and experimentation, you have to make sure that your directors and your managers are empowered to make the necessary changes to the status quo. That means that you're giving them the time and the mandate to trial new processes, workflows, structures, technologies to improve flow time and flow velocity. So as you can see here in this example, you can mark experiments on metric timelines so that you can observe their impact. So here, a change to the code review process resulted in huge improvements to flow time. And the beauty is, well, sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't work. But when you see a great outcome, you can scale it. You apply those learnings to improve organizational systems, and you harvest those success stories to drive the culture change. And, it's a virtuous cycle of people feeling really good about having achieved something. And sometimes it doesn't work, and you have to recognize and applaud that too, because we only learn through trial and error.
Yeah, as you said, Naomi, culture change is super hard. We're trying to change our culture all the time in little ways, but it's a big way to make it safe for individuals and teams to try something out and fail. And I'll call your attention to the right, that psychological safety and the personal example you can set by demonstrating that. I go about my whole day like everything's an experiment. If I'm driving somewhere, I take an alternate path to see if it might be faster. Everything I do is an experiment because I'm on the continuous improvement journey. I'm a golfer, and every swing is different because I'm always trying something out. And I enjoy that. Not everybody feels good about that. Not all personality types are that way. So in your organization, you have to really stand up and applaud those who tried an experiment, even when it failed. And then the thing I'll call out on the don't side is don't disengage from the process. Being a leader that comes into a room and says, hey, you guys need to experiment, and then leaves is not going to be effective in getting any experimentation done. So really, it's important you stay motivated and engaged with the teams to understand what experiments are going on, that they're visible and transparent, and that you celebrate the experiment even if the outcome isn't positive.
Yeah, so perfect. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next play now, which is about investing with intent. But for this one, we do have a serious poll that we want to ask you, which is, what's your view of tech debt in your organization? We don't have much. We have some, but are conscientious about paying it down. We have a lot, and it keeps me up at night. Or it's like the US federal debt. It keeps growing, but nobody cares. So put in your votes. Let's hear what your experience is. Oh, there we go. Here are the results.
Pretty balanced overall, I'd say. I think a lot of you are in better shape, or maybe you're a little more optimistic. I definitely believe we were near the bottom of this chart at HCSC for a long time, that we were so focused on delivering the next thing that we didn't pick our head up and really examine how much more complicated it was getting. In my mind, there's a couple, the role of CIO and the senior IT leadership team is pretty straightforward. A couple of things jump out: acquiring and retaining the talent you need to do the job, high on the list. Also high on the list is to secure the future. So even though CIO means career is over, meaning you're not going to stay in the job at one place for very long, it's still part of your core job to make sure that it's healthy when you leave, when you retire, or however you exit an organization. I won't tell the 3 envelopes joke that comes to mind right now. So part of securing that future is to proactively and quickly address the technical debt, the compliance, the security risks. This is kind of where the shift, and I mentioned Mick's book, the shift from project to product helps. Because projects are time bound. They're initiatives that start and stop. Products endure. So having long-term ownership of the product allows the team that owns that product to think past today's challenge into the longer term areas where you can invest. And that can be planned into their quarterly roadmaps. They have an incentive to get better all the time.
Yeah, and let me explain this image here, because this is typically what happens when you introduce a new product, right? The business goals demand a short-term focus on capabilities, right? That's features. So heavy investment in features before push to market, that's the green line. But then, as you push on features, you start to accrue technical debt and your defects start to climb and quality starts to deteriorate to the point where you can't focus any attention on features, right? Because you're dealing with all this defect work, but still the pressure for features is on, so you're not really given any time to pay down the debt, which might solve a lot of those defects, and you just find yourself going into what we call the product death spiral. So the establishing the long-lived product ownership helps you give attention to all these elements so you don't find yourself in that situation.
Product death spiral sounds so scary. We want to avoid that, I think. Let me give an analogy. So I have 4 children. I should have said that early on. I'm very proud of my children, but it has caused me to watch a lot of kids movies. So sometimes my analogies are kids movies. For those of you that have seen The Incredibles, there's a part of the movie where Mr. Incredible is going to rescue someone, and he starts down this long bridge and he gets shot with this little silver ball of goo, and he gets hit once and he keeps running. He gets hit twice and then he starts getting hit more and more, and he doesn't even reach the end of the bridge because all the silver balls of goo are so heavy that he can no longer move. And that's what it's like when you have a product that you never address the technical debt. You just gather these things, monkeys on your back, until the product is so brittle that it can't be improved. And adding a feature makes everybody scared. And you all have these black boxes in your organization that nobody wants to touch because they know every time they touch it, something goes wrong. And so what do we do to insulate ourselves? We come up with 17 layers of testing and acceptance that slows things down even further. So how do you manage that? Well, again, part of your job in securing the future is to look at the mix of work and make sure that you're not seeing the chart that Naomi talked about earlier, that you see a healthy mix of work and your flow is appropriate.
Yeah, and that really requires, a lot of organizations, now that they're thinking about the shift from project to product, they think that they need to hire new product managers, right? Where do we get the skills to do this? And I actually think that this is a skill that you can cultivate in existing staff, just to have more of a disciplined approach, because this product is yours for the long run. You're not going to be reassigned in 12 months. So so what do you do with that information, right? The next play is to visualize where your investment is going. So development teams know that technical debt can accumulate when they're developing software, but they always feel powerless when the business keeps prioritizing features over improving the code base. While on the other hand, they're being held responsible for quality. Russell, have you found that to be the case? Teams cannot kind of articulate and justify in a coherent way when it's time to pay down debt.
Definitely. And I would say it's not that they can't, they've tried and failed. So the technical team members, the developers, the quality assurance folks, the architects, all of those with technical skills that are trying to do the best job possible, they know which parts of the application they don't want to touch. And you'll see it in estimates if you pay attention. But since nobody pays attention to them, because it's always about what did we sell most recently? What are the set of features we have to deliver for whatever reason? They sit at their desk and grumble about it instead. Well, why do they grumble? Because they've tried to tell you and you didn't listen. So having metrics that show what they're trying to tell you makes it a much better conversation. They weren't able to articulate in terms that I as a leader or you as a leader could understand the trade-off you were making. They just said it's hard. We're hard. We need to do these things. Okay, well, we'll do those later is the general answer, because we are very optimistic people in IT. We plan on happy path. We always think we're going to get this done and then we'll be able to do the more important stuff later. So one of the ways to improve that conversation is to measure where the time is being spent. At HCSC, we rely heavily on this flow distribution to look at the trade-offs we're making. It's not one size fits all. Every product is in a different part of their journey. So this tells you a story. Naomi, do you want to talk about the story?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea is like, if you never pay down debt, which is here denoted in purple, right? So if debt hasn't been paid down for a long time, you're going to find yourself inundated with defects, but also really not being able to get that many features done. So this is this is how it helps to say, listen, we can't squeeze out any features because we've not paid down debt, and as a result, we're inundated with defects, and every feature takes a long time. So give us some time to pay down debt, and you'll see that gradually defects will go down, and we'll have more bandwidth to do feature work, and features will be shorter, right? It'll take us less time to deliver them. So it's just a very visual way to make that explicit. Now, the beauty of it for leaders is that when you're measuring flow distribution across all your products and all your portfolios, you know, your tools can kind of roll up the information that you need for your attention. And, you know, you can get alerts about, you know, products that are seeing like low feature distribution, like beneath a certain threshold. And that means that you can anticipate problems there in growing the business because no features are coming through. Or high defect distribution. That means that there are a lot of quality problems, and that more and more of the delivery budget is going to unplanned work. You should also be made aware of absent debt distribution. I mean, debt, you know, yeah, you can do big pushes, but you should also always have like a little something going on there. So no debt distribution for a long time should be a cause for alarm, because it means that you don't have an innovation runway. And risk work here is security patching, compliance work, stuff like that. So, you know, every value stream has to be patching here and there. You should be on high alert when there's no security or compliance work ever making its way into the delivery. I know of a company that had vulnerabilities open since 2012 that they never prioritized, could never get to, until they finally got their flow metrics and could make it very clear that that was something that they had to take care of. So
Great.
yeah, let's move to this one, Russell.
Yeah, so making it visible is really only the first step, because then how do you become more strategic about what you're seeing? And I love this slide, the chart on the right, matching what you're seeing in the data over a relatively important time period. You don't want to do this on a sprint by sprint basis, obviously, but matching the data over the long run and what you intend for the product or the value stream is really important. If you have a mature product and it's sitting down at the bottom of this chart, that's okay, because every product is on its own journey. But if you just launched a value stream, it's your new business capability that you're going to market with, and it's sitting down at a level 4 or level 5 maturity or decline, where all of the work is around defects, you're not going to reach your goals. You're going to have trouble matching the marketplace with this new technology. And you really have to think about what's going wrong. Do we not have the right quality measures in place when we're releasing functionality? Are we not focused on the right things? Are we just churning out features, not value adding features? So over time, you can measure this on your portfolio of products to make decisions on where to invest, how to invest. You might have a product that's and a value stream that's completely at the bottom, but a new market opens up and it's going to change your investment profile. Maybe you need to look at re-platforming that product because there's an opportunity to really go after new revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, distribution, at the end of the day, it is a zero-sum game, right? So it helps if you have an overall distribution target, you know, maybe at an annual basis that is appropriate to where you are in your life cycle. And then you can adjust tactically within those bands based on quarterly results that you're trying to achieve. But overall, this will give you the guardrails to make sure that you have a healthy mix of work profiles to sustain your product for the long run. Yeah, so we're moving on to the next play, which is about measuring business agility. So we're going to start this off with a poll, last poll of the day. I want to ask you guys, what percentage of your development teams do you think can complete their work in progress in less than 12 months in order to begin new work? So considering everything they've already committed to and begun, but how long would it basically take them to complete it? I'm very interested in your answers to this one. All right. 35%.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Interesting result. So Naomi, you shared with me that Tasktop's benchmark is that only 35% of value streams can finish their work. 35% have zero capacity for new work in the next 12 months.
Right.
So
right.
that's a telling story. That means there's a lot of work jammed up. And I don't know about you guys, but work that our operations team needed last year or thought about a year ago or 2 years ago isn't always the right work now. Market conditions have changed. They found a way to operationally adjust for things. There's been bigger opportunities, always something. So I think everybody in this team probably has a mix of what they think of as agile and waterfall teams. So maybe let's not do a poll, but the raise hand feature at the bottom, for those of you that are interested, how many of you ask the question on a regular basis, how soon can we start this work? So if you ask that question on a regular basis, how soon can we start this work? Hit that raise hand button. I'll give you about 30 seconds to think about it. Nine people voted yes so far, 10, okay. Creeping up a little bit. I think it must be hard to find the raise hand button because I think, thank you for those that voted. I think for all of us, you can unraise your hand, by the way. For all of us in IT leadership, it's a common thing. Like we are urgent about starting work. But now that we're reset, let me ask, how many of you on a regular basis ask your teams, how soon can we finish this work so that we're available to start new work? How many of you ask on a regular basis, how soon can we finish this work so we can start new work? If it's the same 13 people, I'm floored because these are cross-purpose. So I won't torture you guys anymore. It is a very common practice in our worlds to think about loading the teams up, use every available cycle of everybody on the team, make sure everybody's busy. And that's traditional waterfall methodology, looking at your resource loads and trying to make sure everybody's busy. There's whole disciplines around this. But it's working cross-purpose to your goals. You do that because it's what the Gantt chart says you need to do to hit the project plan date. It's just kind of built into the way we think about things.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you see as a leader of such a large organization, Russell, when it comes to this?
Yeah. Well, I'll put it in an analogy. I love analogies. How many of you know what you're going to have for lunch on February 12th? Not many of you, right? You don't know where you're going to be. You don't know what you're going to want to eat. You don't know if you'll even want to eat lunch. But you're asking your product teams to predict what they're going to do on February 12th and every day from now until then and beyond. How does this make sense to anybody? If they've committed all of that energy to making a plan that you have hordes of people running around asking them daily, where are you on percentage on this plan? And your measurement is in false statistics like, hey, I'm almost done. Okay, we'll write that down as 90%. We've all been through this for years. But it's not giving you the ability as a leader to shape what the next most important thing is. And then that next most important thing comes up. The CEO or the CFO or somebody comes to you and says, hey, there's $1 million opportunity here. And you don't have any levers to pull other than go into a massive replanning cycle. There's a core agile principle around deferred commitment. And I think it's important, and I'll throw a quote out there later around this, but ask yourself, why are you scheduling work out that far? You need to say no to making a commitment that far in advance. It doesn't matter how well you think you plan. you're not giving time for the rest of the world to have to throw curveballs at you.
Yeah, precisely. I think that one of the most profound insights that people get when they start measuring their value streams is the amount of overload, all the work that's been taken on and that just cannot be completed within any meaningful market time frame. So thankfully, your value stream metrics can help you correct the behavior. When you measure your flow time, okay, so how fast it takes you to get things done, and your flow velocity, how much you can get done within a time period, and you cross that with all the work in progress, which in value stream terms is called flow load, your value stream metrics can calculate how long it will take until a value stream has capacity for new work. And like Russell said, we find that 35% of value streams have zero capacity for new work in the next 12 months, given what they've already begun. And that there's quite a bit of them, right, that don't have capacity for 6 months. But when we talk about business agility, it's all about that, being able to react, being able to respond. So if I've already started so much that it's going to take me 12 to 18 months to complete, how can I ever respond? So the tip for the IT leaders is to help product teams get this visibility and balance demand versus capacity by measuring true resource capacity. When we're doing our planning, we should be looking at information like this. And the other thing you can do is you can teach your product teams to focus on delivering complete units of value before taking on something new. There's a lot of politics when we're trying to satisfy a lot of stakeholders. Yeah, I'll get that started for you and I'll throw you a story, right? But by doing that, I'm lengthening the time it's going to take me to complete all the other things that I started for other folks, one at a time. Focus on feature by feature. And also notice that the higher the load on the value stream, the less it delivers. There's so much context switching, the less agile it becomes. So when spread too thin over too much work in progress, the flow of value slows down to a trickle.
Yeah, one of the things maybe those of you listening closely might have heard is this idea of measuring output. Don't do that at an individual level. Naomi teed it up correctly. This is about team delivery, not an individual. You're really going to send the wrong signal to your organization if you start thinking about velocity and output at an individual developer or tester level. You're keeping the team from ownership when you do that. So be very careful about that. Agile gets very out of whack if you start trying to apply team metrics to an individual. So maybe as we transition to this is going to be the hardest part for many of you. We all know in our job, there's sales pressures, there's operational pressures, might come from the board. It may be unreasonable. It may seem unreasonable to you that you can set priorities and stick to them. I think the key though is make sure the priorities that are long-term, and that you are working towards outcomes that are well understood. You've had the conversation we talked about earlier, that you align on the long-term commitments and the language around them, and then be aggressive towards short-term commitments, but don't mix the two up. Don't make long-term commitments that are exact, because it doesn't give you the opportunity to learn. For me, I think of this as like I think of the job of a Scrum Master. A Scrum Master's job is to help a team deliver in a very short increment, generally 2 weeks, given the resources and the priorities going into the sprint. So for that 2-week period, they're relentless about managing towards those outcomes. That's how I think good IT leaders, good technology leaders will think about delivery and think about delivery of value. We use OKRs at HCSC. Whatever your measure is, make sure it's aligned, that gives you air cover to the decisions you need to make to optimize those long-term outcomes and commit to those shorter term outcomes and be committed, and not waste a lot of energy on the midterm or long-term exact commitments. And then make sure your incentives are aligned. And then I did promise you a quote. I like it. Defer your commitments, not your conversations on trade-offs, because it's a disease many of us in IT have had a long time. We're always, as I said earlier, optimistic. So if you're deferring the conversations on trade-offs until you have to be late, and I'll give a quick anecdote. Yesterday, I was with our digital team, and the product managers were feeling like they had no levers to pull. They have 17 or 18 outcomes they're trying to deliver on their fourth quarter. And I said, okay, have you prioritized them? They said, everything's important. I said, okay, you can have the conversation now about the relative priority so you can make good decisions along the way, or you can pick which things fail. And after you no longer have the ability to change what's going to fail, you can hope that you pick the right things. So again, defer your commitments, not your conversations on trade-offs. Have those before you're having to make the trade-offs so you can make smart decisions along the way towards the right trade-offs.
Yeah, so well said. Okay, so we're moving on to our last play, which is about outpacing the competition. Do you remember in one of our first slides, I showed you this end-to-end process? Well, this is the reality of what that process looks like in most enterprises. You know, work is waiting for a long time at each stage, where Agile is accelerating the middle of the value stream, you know, the development team for a specific sprint, but your bottlenecks at this stage lie elsewhere. So like we said earlier, successful transformations are driven by a very concrete and high stakes purpose to lead the market, to win against a competitor. If you're going to be competitive, you know, time to market, this end-to-end thing we're looking at here has to be measured in weeks, not years. And you have to be putting out the first cut of features and learning whether they are directionally viable in order to inform what you do next. Do you abandon? Do you continue? This all has to happen within a quarter for planning and measurement and competitive reasons, right? So these bottlenecks are what you have to address. We're done optimizing in the middle, right?
Yeah, and let me just say, I know I want to manage our time here, so I just want to give one thought. As you think about competitive pressure, and we know that there's competitive pressure, think about the huge opportunity you have. If you're an established business, you own the customers. Right now, you have the customers. Somebody's out there trying to take them away from you. The advantage they have is they don't have technical debt. They don't have a lot of baggage. They don't have maybe some of the politics you have, but you still have the biggest advantage that you have the customers. If you can optimize around making them happy, there's no reason for them to go somewhere else. So leverage that advantage. Don't fall into the trap of thinking you're against your back's against the wall. Your competitors that are out there being VC funded would love to have the advantage you have of thousands or millions of customers.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, Russell, you're such a systems thinker. Where have you seen examples of optimizations that address the wrong bottleneck?
Yeah, I'll try to make this short. It's kind of a long story, but one thing that always jumps to mind when I think about this is we're on an annual product cycle. Insurance products are annualized. There's a 2019 plan and a 2020 plan. All of you are familiar as customers. And so that's hard. And near the end of that, inevitably, there's changes and uncertainty that lead to a lot of pressure at the end. Are we going to deliver to the market the set of benefits, et cetera? Up here, I had in the past thought the way to fix that was to start planning sooner. And that was, to me, nonsensical, because all that led to is more time waiting for answers. The real bottleneck was, how do we establish the right decision-making framework, or how do we make the decisions flexible at the end? So that if you choose yes or no, it's a flag that we built into the solution rather than a game changer. So I think that's always my example of starting sooner and putting more time in it didn't solve the core problem, that we didn't know the answers until very late.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I think, you know, what's really interesting is that, you know, each value stream will have its own idiosyncratic constraints, okay? And that may be solved by the team itself, like we spoke earlier, you know, empowering them to experiment and so on. But a high percentage will suffer from the common system constraints, right? That only an executive can relieve. When you measure all your value streams, you'll be able to identify those systemic issues versus special cases. And, you know, clearly the systemic bottlenecks require big investments in infrastructure, technology, process, resources, people, and they have to be sponsored by the CIO. But the ROI will be huge, right? Because they're going to be slashing flow times across a ton of products. So I just want to give two important tips here. You should set targets to shorten flow time, and that can be done by tackling the places where work waits or takes a long time to get done. It's very tempting to want to set targets around efficiency. But the only value of becoming more efficient is if it shortens time to market or improves end-to-end velocity. So it's a means to an end. Set targets around the end, not the means. There are a variety of traps around efficiency that we don't have time to get into now. Maybe that's a topic for another webinar, but I just wanted to forewarn you not to use that as your OKR. Okay, Russell, we're on our last play, disarming dependencies. You know, like you spoke about, I mean, enterprise IT comes with a lot of baggage, one of which is complex dependencies. While no organization is immune to dependencies, they are the reality, right? You have to manage them or they're gonna manage you. And how do you know you have problems with dependencies? Well, your releases require tremendous contingency planning. Problems are always discovered late when all the pieces come together. Delivery is frequently delayed when components don't play nice with each other, or when you have to have significant employee heroic efforts to save the day, right? Or the cost of testing is high for every little change. That's when your dependencies are managing you. So before you can disarm dependencies as CIOs, you need to expose them, shine the light on them. And your value stream metrics will do that because they're going to show you where work is piling up and slowing down.
Yep, for me, I'm not going to read the list on the right. The one that always jumps out at me are the architectural dependencies. And we spent a lot of time, a lot of energy in IT generally, in the corporate world, trying to think about architectures that'll break these dependencies. And we introduce big programs to go SOA, and we write hundreds or thousands of services in an organization. We find we still have the same problems. What I would say is, this is where going small instead of going big is going to pay dividends. Start small, identify the most important dependency, the thing that is at the crux of a product or value stream, and tactically go after that dependency. How do we make that a feature flag type situation, or a loose coupling, or whatever? Maybe it is SOA is the answer. Go after that one. Knock that one down, then go after the next one. And soon you'll build momentum to knocking those architectural dependencies down, and everyone will have a different answer. When we go big and try to apply a blanket answer, all we do is whack-a-mole, and we knock one set of dependencies down and others pop up. So being targeted, I think, is what I would say.
Well, excellent. Okay. Well, that's it. We walked you real quick through a playbook. We do have a full document that could assist you in assembling, kind of assimilating that information. But we concluded the presentation part of this webinar. So now we're going to answer some of the questions.
All right, let's get started. We'll answer as many questions as we can. And if we can't get to it today, we'll aim to follow up in the Flow Framework community, which you can find via the link in the slide. So the first question we have is, when you're referring to a product, do you mean the product that the company sells, or the solutions that the IT team is developing that supports the delivery of the product?
Yeah, so I'll answer that one first, Russell, and then you can chime in. I mean, the answer is both, right? Because it's like those Russian nesting dolls, right? For every customer-facing product, there are a ton of products that are under the surface supporting it, right? And you have to measure flow for all of them. And you have to consider, for their own benefit, you have to consider them as products. They are products that have internal customers, right? They are used by the layer above them. But at the end of the day, if you want to affect change on the visible part of the product, every impacted nested product will have to be capable of delivering that change in a timely manner. So the flow of each of those product value streams matters just as much as that customer facing one.
Yeah, I'd say the most important thing to me is a product has a value proposition or a need and a set of customers. So anything that services that definition, there's a set of customers, even if they're other products and they have a need that's being fulfilled.
Oh, wait, lost your audio.
I wouldn't get too hung up on language. What works for your organization to describe the landscape?
We hear you now. Okay, Russell, we lost you for a second.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
I was just saying, don't get too hung up on language. Go with what works for your organization to describe the landscape. And as long as you guys have a consistent understanding across your operational areas, then you're in the right space.
Awesome. Another question we have is, in terms of where the investments are going, aren't you missing people investments, change practices, skills, information, share, etc.? How are you accounting for this?
Yeah, I can also try to do this one first from my perspective. I mean, we are absolutely do not mean to miss the people investments. I mean, all the changes to learn a new practice, to develop a skill, to, develop a new process, a change in workflow, all that is what we talk about when we talk about giving folks time to make improvements to their value streams. Our tip is actually, since all those investments, I mean, they're either going to the future capability to deliver, or sometimes they might just be another form of value that you're producing. They should also be considered a unit of value that's flowing through your value stream. If you're doing it to experiment with something, consider it debt. You're building the runway for the future by addressing something that is slowing you down in the present. So it's debt, and it will flow through your value stream, and you should account for it. If it's something like, sometimes I get asked, like folks that are on like platform, infrastructure as a service type of value streams. So sometimes for them, documenting a procedure, documenting best practices is value that they create for their internal customers. And that to me is a feature and should be measured as such when it flows through their value stream.
I'll just add, we didn't spend a lot of time on it. We were talking about portfolio investment, and there's a lot of different kinds of investment in an organization. What I will say, the tie-in is that if you are following what we're talking about here, and you give the team the metrics to assess their own performance and the ability to invest where they believe, they're going to see that as an investment in them as well. And it's not to say we're not trying to teach people skills, giving them flexibility to move in the organization, all of the things you're hinting on. It's part of the equation that people, Naomi's example showed it very well. They got much happier when they had a roadmap to how are they making their product better. And I think that's universally true. When people have purpose in what they're doing, and they're coming to work with a set of goals that they feel are achievable, they're going to be more engaged and feel better about their work.
Awesome. All right, I think we have time for maybe just one more question. Your suggestions to adopt the flow framework or a value stream mindset in a no product driven company. Do you have any suggestions for that?
I think the question is, how would you adopt the flow framework or value stream mindset if you don't have products? I think you naturally have products, whether you've identified them and think about them is a nuance. So you might not think about products, and you might not be making decisions within a product framework, but you definitely have products in your organization. You just might not be managing them. So I think the flow framework may actually lead you to identifying those products. But Naomi, you may have a much deeper answer in all your experience with different companies.
I definitely agree with you there, Russell. And, I think that the value stream mindset and value stream management can be done over, like any operating model, right? And you should start where you are, measure where you are today. That might inform how you transition. If you transition to a product model, you'll have lots of data to tell you what's the best way for us to restructure ourselves and stuff, but you'll get some insights into how work flows today. And I think value stream management can be done in a project-oriented model. It's just that the timeframes, and the lack of longevity might make it harder to carry over the insights when everything gets reassigned the next year. It really depends on how far you are down that road.
Excellent.
Naomi, I know we're wrapping up. I just want to say thank you, and thank you for all of you that had a moment to join us. I think there are some closeout comments, but really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, Russell, and thank you to our attendees. It was really fun.